Daisy Peña, welcome to the Modern Sales Management Show.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm so excited about this conversation because, you are on the front lines. You're doing this every day. You're managing a team. But before we get into some of the insight that I think you have for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about your road to managing sales teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you the short answer, and then I'll go into the longer winded story. So the short answer is I was very vocal since joining my Twilio, my most recent company, from the start that I wanted to move into leadership, and I know that that planted the seed. And when the time came, a little over a year later, my hiring manager pitched me for this role. The longer story of that is that I've been in sales for about 15 years now. I started in 2001, and progressed from customer service, sales, account executive, had a couple of director roles along the way with the goal of ultimately leading a team, and somehow it didn't happen, not to this level. So it really took joining Twilio to find myself in that position, and almost like I had to create that opportunity in essence, by doing some discovery. I didn't initially think that I would be a sales manager. I think it came about as a natural progression of my career. Really, it was I was ready to coach and develop teams. I was ready to apply some of the same skills that I had picked up so quickly throughout my career. And I was also ready to kind of take on a new challenge. And so Twilio gave me that opportunity, but I had to also raise my hand, throw my name in the hat, and voice that. And also, once I was identified as a high potential individual, my first year being there, I sought out another leader that had actually been promoted from individual contributor. And I met with her once a month for a year, just trying to determine whether or not, leadership in sales was for me, or if it was just another leadership position, a role that needed to be created. Uh, and what really got me to believe that sales was the right place, it's because I didn't want to lose that customer facing experience. And I didn't want to lose what fulfills me the most about being in sales, which is, not only helping to develop teams, but also ultimately like winning and seeing the results, of your hard work and your grind right in front of you. So yeah, Twilio gave me the opportunity, and I'm happy to be doing it now.
I didn't realize that that mentorship component was part of your journey. Now, are you at the point where individual contributors are coming to you and asking you what are the steps they need to take to see if management's right for them?
Absolutely. I'm having that happen actually since very early on. I kind of have a little bit of a following internally at Twilio. Several, individual contributors that were working alongside me wanted to join my team. And then also others that, basically came up to me and said, how do I get into leadership? How did it happen for you? What do I do? And now having a team I've actually, right now I started with 6, now I'm up to almost 15. I have a lot of reps who are just like, I want to get into leadership ultimately. And so a big thing is for me, coaching and driving them to take some of the same steps that I took. I said, identify another manager you can talk to. First, determine whether or not this is actually what you want, and determine if you have, the chops for it, if you want to deal with the personalities, and if you want to deal with, managers in sales do remove a lot of the shit that you deal with, with the higher ups. So I think it's more or less coaching them to understand whether or not this is actually a path they want to take, and then what are sort of the actions that they need to follow in order to, get there similarly.
That's so important. That first step that you mentioned, is it something that is a fit for them? And it's okay if it's not a fit for them, but you're trying to make sure that they take all the necessary steps and ask all the right questions and talk to all the right people to make sure it's something that they really want, because it is very different. How did your customer service background, coming up through customer service into sales and then into sales management, um, how did that impact you? Would you recommend that path because you know the customer stories, you know that what you're selling inside and out?
I think it's definitely a big help. My customer service role was essentially for a company that it was during the era of Yahoo Hot Jobs, right? It was a company that had a similar online portal for jobs, and we were moving away from, the newspaper and the old way of finding jobs. So I had to also upsell. So it was customer service with the goal of identifying new business, ultimately. And then it kind of it was a hybrid role essentially. So I think that it was a great way for me to not only like build relationships and find out how I can, upsell and progress conversations and ultimately win business. But it also got me into like a BDR role after that and et cetera. And so I think it depends. There are many ways to get into, sales management and sales in general. And I will say, like, as long as you have that drive to solve problems, that drive to, you know, drive a customer toward ultimately, making a decision based on a compelling event, and you feel like what you're offering them is worthwhile and is really going to make a change. Then yes, being in customer success, you really build that relationship at the core, which I think ultimately helps you in sales.
So now that you've been managing teams for a while, let's talk trends. How has sales management changed in the past few years, and what has stayed the same?
Ooh, I mean, what stays the same is that we still have a target. We still have a number. We still have to deliver a number. What has changed? Many things. I mean, this year in particular has been, with the pandemic and everything going on in the world, it has been leadership for the ages. I think you really had to grow as a leader relatively quickly. And also you were dealing with many external factors that were impacting your team that you had, obviously no control over. So I think the way that management has changed now in sales is that you need to be more adaptable. Before you could get away as a manager with some, solution selling and just like the very standard sales processes that got you in the door. Now that process, those processes can be dated in today's day and age, especially when you're dealing with technology and innovation and so it really is about adaptability. And I think sales leaders of today, at least the ones that I've looked up to, have always been able to adapt and change their methods based on what's driving that customer, and also kind of build up their teams in that way. I think you also need to be creative and not be afraid to say like, look, this is not may not be the perfect way to do it. We may need to shift course, and just be constantly open to feedback from your teams, from your peers, and kind of open to just the fact that the selling environment is constantly changing, and customers are not super eager in this day and age to like sign a contract. And yeah.
So, I mean, one of the reasons I'm so glad that you're sharing your insight with our audience is the way that you talk about the methodology versus adaptability, or just the combination of strategy with, the way to get something done and the creativity needed to change on the fly. How do you balance those? And what's the hardest part about that?
So when I think about let's start with strategy. So strategy to me includes, like, you have to always have, sort of a process you can fall back into. You have to be adaptable, and you have to find some repeatable methods to the madness when you're selling. Creativity is tied to being bold. Essentially you have to be bold, you have to be willing to try something new. Then maybe it's a little bit of a risk. And then maybe, and I'll give you an example being, we have a contact center offering at my company Twilio. And oftentimes when companies are looking to replace a legacy system for contact center, they submit an RFP and essentially, request for proposal and whatnot. And so we sometimes have taken a bold approach of saying, no bid, we're not going to complete your RFP. We don't fall into this check checking the boxes solution. We're not out of the box. And almost like sitting back and seeing how the customer responds to that. Are they still going to consider us, or are they going to say, no RFP, you don't have the business? So balancing those in a way is it's almost like it's a science and then it's art. It's you have to be willing to read your customer, understand like when to not take a risk, when to be okay losing the sale, because ultimately long term you are going to maybe bring that customer back. Sticking to your guns and sticking to the value of your offering, and how that probably speaks more volumes than actually like being transactional. So I think it's constantly thinking about, okay, how well do I know this customer? How well do I know, the future of where their business is going, what they're investing in this year, what their priorities are, to actually confidently, be bold in this situation? Or do I need to fall back to being more strategic and follow the process and then say, hey, listen, here's my stab at your RFP, but it's obviously we don't fit this this sort of like rubric that you have in front of us. We want the opportunity to earn your business by showing you our offering in a different way. So if that helps explain it, it's reading your audience in a way, and getting to know your customers well, so that you can choose when to be bold and kind of take that risk, and when to just fall through the process.
So how do you teach? So that's a hard thing to internalize as an individual, as a manager. How do you teach that to your team where they feel safe either coming to you or making decisions in the middle of a deal? How do you teach that creativity to them?
I have to say that one of the things that I guess one of the strategies I use is I have this back and forth scenario where I will talk to one of my reps about, okay, what in a perfect world, what's the outcome that you expect? What have you tried? What happens if you do this or that? How do you think the customer will respond? And it's almost like getting them a little bit out of their comfort zone and challenging them, and ultimately saying, I trust your judgment, trust your gut, ultimately put yourself in their shoes. What decisions do you think they would make if you present them with this option? So that sort of exercise of getting them to trust their judgment and their gut, and also to sort of take a step back and put themselves in the customer's shoes, is one of the values that Twilio actually does really help train you over time to become better at it. And look, it's not always going to be one perfect score. I think it's just something that you constantly need to train, and something you constantly need to work on.
No, that's, I mean, along those lines, you've worked in all types of sales organizations and run many of them at various levels. What are some other characteristics of a well-oiled sales machine? I think that trust that you mentioned is a really good foundation.
Trust is essential. I mean, sales enablement is obviously essential, making sure that everybody's following some sort of process that they can fall back on. They understand obviously the product well, and you can identify blind spots, areas and where there's weakness there, so that you can quickly act on it. I think also a well-oiled sales machine has to do with having that constant open communication with your team, so that they can provide feedback and they can step up and say, hey, I've tried all of this and it's not working, versus just kind of get stuck in their own ways, which oftentimes happens. A lot of times, sales reps can be very egotistical. They want to win that deal and they don't want to admit that they did something wrong. And it's just almost creating those open lines of communications, so that they feel like it's okay to fail in this space. Obviously, you have a number to hit, but you need to always learn something from it, and feel like, okay, here's what I tried, didn't work. Here's what I learned. Next time, this is what I'm going to do. This will be my approach. And then I think another area that I want to highlight that really helps with sales development and in having a well-oiled sales machine is it's not always being so transactional and thinking that I need to deliver the number without sitting back and thinking about the company as a whole. Like what is it about what I'm doing and what I'm delivering that's going to ultimately benefit the company and the team. And when you create that sort of environment, it does allow the individual contributors to feel like they're working towards something that's beyond just their number. It's almost like you're contributing to a bigger picture, a bigger long-term priority overall. And so your conversations with your customers should reflect that at the end of the day. And yeah, and constantly, feeling like your team should be open to always learning and changing their ways. If at any time they're stuck, a good question that I ask when I'm interviewing people is, it's middle of the quarter and you don't have a clear path to your number. What are the things that you focus on? What do you do? Just to sort of assess their quick thinking strategy, and do they freak out? Do they double down on activities? Do they communicate with me? And those who are like, well, I come to my manager and I say, could I be doing something differently? And then I heighten my activity and double down and prospect more. I think it has to be a combination of things, and it really comes down to having that openness with your team, and being able to constantly feed that.
So in your experience, what are some of the biggest missteps that sales managers make when motivating their team and building that open communication?
Hmm. Well, I can tell you from experience, it's probably not understanding the different drivers and motivators that each individual has. I think not taking the time to get to know the team and get to know each individual, and sort of like what they prioritize in their lives, whether it's, I want to buy a house in a year, or whether it's I ultimately want to lead a team. You should, when in sales, if you don't know what's motivating your reps at an individual level and what they're working toward and what they're looking to achieve in the next 2-3 years, and you're not letting them know how continuously reaching their number is going to open that door, and here's how, and kind of drive them toward that with the focus that this is adding to the wheelhouse of what you ultimately want to be, and reminding them of that. I think it's definitely a big gap, and not a lot of sales managers do that. They don't often take the time, because they also have their own numbers and their own kind of leadership agenda to lead. So I think that's a big miss.
That's a good point. One of the things I like hearing you talk about is the way that you describe the role that focus and energy play on a sales team. Can you explain that for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So focus and energy, meaning that I think that if my individual reps obviously know that they have a target and a number to hit, the best I can do for them is make sure that their focus and energy is in the right place. Oftentimes they're derailed by, as we're dealing with a pandemic right now. So there's clearly, the external factors that they may have a sick family member and whatnot. And you're not realizing this is impacting, whether or not they can pick up the phone and make those few calls that they need to on a day-to-day basis. So being able to constantly ask, where's your focus and energy? And almost like being able to read whether or not your rep is actually driving toward that number that they need to hit, is something that I apply in my management philosophy on a regular basis. And it's really about identifying what obstacles can I remove. How can I contribute to creating the conditions so that you have a successful quarter? And the sooner I know what's impacting your day-to-day, do you need a couple of days to recharge and take time off and come back refreshed, for example? The better I'll be at helping, my team be successful.
I really like the way that you look at that, because you look at it from how can sales managers support the right focus and energy. Ask first of all, assessing where their focus and energy is, and identifying obstacles that you can remove to keep. If they're successful, you're going to be successful, and to
Yeah,
keep them
absolutely. I mean, it's people managing one-on-one at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, why is building future leaders and future sales leaders important? Why is having that farm team and cultivating that important? Walk us through kind of the old mindset versus the new mindset around building future leaders?
Sure. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the old mindset because I have been in sales organizations that definitely operated with that older mindset, and sort of why I think that was I guess a disadvantage to potential, individuals that wanted to take on leadership. So a lot of times, like I was in an environment in which, a VP or sales leader didn't necessarily want to nurture another leader out of, I don't know, it could be potentially fear, or it could be, I know more than you, egotistical driven, and I think that it wasn't effective because your top sales people, if they have an interest in leading, you want to replicate what they're doing well, and you want to replicate and cultivate that. The quicker you do it, the better, because otherwise they'll leave and do it somewhere else. So I think the mindset today, especially in the day of tech, where talent, great talent in sales technology these days is really hard to find. I think when you identify someone that actually wants to lead, and that shows that potential, it's important to cultivate that so that that person not only stays, but that person also helps train, your next set of reps. And it's also, I think, a good mindset for scale. At a company, it's how you demonstrate, like, we can scale because I've identified two leaders and I've been coaching them, and I've been also asking them to seek sponsorship from other leaders at the company, and I think they're ready. There's they probably have a couple of areas of improvement that they'll continue to work on, but I've invested in developing them, and ultimately I think the leaders that do that end up with just like a much higher loyal chance of loyalty from your team, because they see that you actually take an interest in the longevity of their career, and also them developing as leaders.
I think that's really good advice. Uh, how do you manage up and down at the same time? What's your secret?
I think that I'm still figuring that one out, Josh. I think it's being authentic at the end of the day. I think that there are times where I'm better at managing down, in the sense that I'm so focused on uh, getting my team to be successful and getting them to be motivated. And at times I'm better at managing up, meaning my team is doing well and I have the time to contribute to those big leadership discussions, and really like contribute towards developing our playbook and more of the operational side of things. And now I'm on our COO council, which is something I'm honored to be a part of, and one of 20 people for a year to be part of that. And so it's given me the opportunity to kind of hone the managing up muscle a little bit more. I think it's always something, that an area that I'm working on, dividing that focus so that I can being able to do both really well, is a challenge. I think some people do one or the other well, so I'm constantly like trying to figure out, is this the quarter that I manage up a little bit more because we need more VDRs and I need to prove the reasons why, etc.
No, that makes sense. I think you made some really good points. Being human and listening before maybe taking action, and putting yourself in situations where you can listen to what's important to the executive team. So I
Absolutely.
have one more question for you before we wrap up. What advice, so if there's somebody who's brand new to sales management listen to this podcast today, what advice would you have for brand new sales managers?
I'm going to say the sooner you start to develop an authentic management philosophy that's unique to you, the better. I think it's more or less like it's easy to get wrapped up in so and so does it this way, and this person does it that way. I think identifying your own unique, philosophy is best, and then you have that as a foundation, and you just keep developing it and evolving it. And you need that at the core so that you don't lose yourself. It's very easy to run around, trying to, I guess, please various teams that have demands on you, get your team to focus. That then you don't realize that, like, I need to put my oxygen mask on first and check that my well-being and that I know, that this feels true to me, and then just kind of follow on that trajectory. And even if it's, something that may be a little controversial or different than senior leadership, it's almost like I have at least in my back pocket that this is ideally what I would love to test. And while I'm going to adjust to, the process and what's in place, uh, when I get the opportunity to test something that feels unique to me, and I think could be successful, I will. And I think if you don't identify your own personal authentic management philosophy, that becomes harder to do later on.
Well, Daisy, this has been a great conversation. Where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, Daisy KPE. And also I'm on Twitter, same hashtag, Daisy KPE. I need
Wonderful.
to be a little bit more active with my Twitter posts. I think I follow more people than I actually tweet.
I can definitely relate to that. Before we wrap up, is there any last sales management advice that you'd like our audience to understand? Something that it's on your mind that you're passionate about?
Sure. I mean, I think some last advice is definitely have a really good sales strategy person that's building the right reporting for you so that you can have, great data supporting the work that you're doing, and great data to support, your numbers if there's a blind spot. And having sort of like a couple of, right hands, or a right hand and a left hand in your sales team that you can also get feedback from, is also a great thing to do. Like, definitely you need to build that it either that tenure rep or that, like sales leader on the rise, that can constantly, provide feedback from areas that you may miss, blind spots. Those are all great tips.
Great points to wrap up on. So Daisy Peña, I want to thank you for taking time to and sharing your experience with our audience today. And that does it for another episode of the Modern Sales Management Show. Have a great day.